everyone, and thought I'd start today off with an extension of a conversation that actually Debbie and I had earlier in the week. Since this is brought to us by the Mentor Project, I was thinking about the relationship between editing and mentoring and how, in what ways an editor is really a mentor. And it's especially true in magazine editing. And I can talk about those differences, but I thought it might be instructive because it gives you an inside view of what an editor does that's inside facing with you and your material, or any writer who is coming into the publishing world where they do not normally inhabit, but of which they will be a part, an intense part really, for a short, intense time. So as I said to Debbie, I said, editors are mentors, but on a different model of mentoring. We're like episodic or periodic mentors. And I'll tell you how that happens in magazine publishing and article publishing, and the differences in book publishing. And the differences are interesting because you tend to have a longer relationship in book publishing. You also have there's a different contractual obligation because the book is on a much longer time frame usually. And there are legal royalty rights that play out over a significantly longer time period. For example, you don't even get royalty statements. You only get them every 6 months, and usually they lag by 6 months. And also, usually in book publishing, you have an agent, and the agent is also your representative and hopefully mentor in some significant ways. So let's start at the beginning, and I'll tell you how editors serve as your representative and mentor, facing to you, but also representing you to the inside of the company that you might not see. So a kind of a mentor and absentia still working for you and on your behalf. So you pitch an idea to a publication. This is not, by the way, true also of blogging. It's a completely different model. But in traditional or legacy journalism, where you're pitching an article to a publication of any frequency, you pitch an article usually to a specific editor, and the editor takes an interest in it. And from that moment on, you have a relationship in which part of the editor's role is really as your mentor and advocate. And first off, as an advocate, arguing for the idea within the publication. There are lots of considerations for whether an article gets done and when it gets assigned, because each issue of any publication is made up of a bunch of different pieces, and editors like to balance the ideas out. Sometimes ideas come in that just are so absolutely necessary that they get assigned regardless of when they're going to run, but usually because there's some urgency to them, and it's, yeah, that's a great idea. We're going to run this issue, or we've already figured out what's running this issue, but we want that for next issue or the issue after. So the editor is first and foremost an advocate for your idea, and remains an advocate for your idea all the way through. And that's really important because the writer has no clue what's going on inside the publication. There are like many opportunities where editors discuss the makeup of an issue, how each article is played, what resources are deployed for each article. For example, illustrations, how it's going to be played in the publication, how well it's going to be publicized, all the kinds of resources that will be brought to bear on it. And the editor becomes the advocate for that. I am a fierce advocate for anyone whose ideas I decide I want to work with, I want to see in print, and that I buy. And I don't care whether it's going to be a 250-word article or it's going to be a 3,000-word article. I am as fiercely for it regardless of the length of the article. And I'm interested in the idea. I'm interested in seeing that it gets positioned right, played right, and all the resources brought to it. So inside, I'm an advocate for it. And I'm also a cheerleader. I'm cheering for that article. I'm cheering for the writer. So I will probably send to the writer things I've read, pieces of information I've gathered on that topic, to possibly include some I might definitely want included, but for the education and edification of the writer to have the fullest scope of information on the topic. And as I said, there's no point in having anyone do an article unless they're bringing some new insight to it. I mean, I don't want to publish, I don't want to waste space on what we already know or know how to think about something. So I'm always working with the writer to make sure that our visions are roughly equal about the idea and its importance. And so I will feed the writer information. I will make sure everyone on the inside that they can't see knows how important I think all this is. And when the article comes into me, I may have lots of questions on it, and I'll probably go over all those questions with the writer. I will send the writer back a manuscript with my questions embedded in it. And that is a measure of my love and interest. It may not always strike the writer that way. Usually at some point it does, maybe sometimes after they get over the shock of seeing how many questions I might ask. But also I think the writers, and I hear this from writers, so is that, wow, you really got into this, really took an interest in this, really are giving this full brain consideration. And many of them regard that as a compliment. And it's true. I give every article that same amount of love. So I will work with the writer to make sure that they understand all my questions, that they have the information to answer all the questions. And so I'm still advocating for them and their article, because I still think it's the same terrific idea we started out with, and I want to see it in full fruition, in full force in the publication. And I'm getting as many resources as I can to the writer. If the writer needs books, if the writer needs articles, if the writer needs access to material, I'm carrying on getting all that stuff to a writer. If writer needs access to people, I might suggest people who would have interesting perspectives and information for the writer to talk to, and I will get them together, or suggest that the writer get in touch and perhaps make an introduction. So as I said, I'm cheerleading. I'm often coaching the writer and asking the questions and making sure that they feel confident, giving them the confidence to go ahead and do what it is that I'm asking the writer to do. You know, it's true, every once in a while, I'm going to discover that the idea that the writer had, which was good, was an idea that the writer couldn't really execute. And sometimes I actually decide that on the first pass when I take a first look at the finished manuscript, and I just see it's so far from what was needed. I might make that decision. Or I might give the writer a call and go over the manuscript, and in conversation with the writer, might make a determination that this writer is never going to get on track with seeing it any differently or doing anything differently than they already did. And in that case, I will take the article and do what's needed. It will still have the writer's name on it, but so, in a way, I'm a cheerleader for the writer, even when the writer might not even know it. And the printed article has their name and they look good. And, Psychology Today has done a lot of the work to make it look good. And this happens all the time in publishing, and in article publishing, especially, not so much in book publishing. So all the way through, I'm an advocate, cheerleader, and usually a coach, but in those particular cases, I'm not the coach. And always a mentor in that. And this is something Debbie and I really discussed. A mentor in that I will be asking the writer questions and giving them suggestions and resources of all kinds and connections. And these will be the questions that I ask, will be the kinds of questions that any writer will encounter or should encounter with any future article. So these are not one-offs. These are things that, when addressed and then the writer then executes well, these are permanent takeaways that the writer will have going forward, just as people take things forward from a mentoring relationship. And that's the case here too. And so then an article, a revise of an article comes in and it gets polished. May need, sometimes have to go back to the writer a second time. Not too common, I'd say maybe 50% of the time. And once in a blue moon, a third time. And by that time, I usually have such a really good relationship with the writer that it's okay, all right, that running the last 10 yards. And they know by now that I'm just working on their behalf to make sure that this is a fully polished, really interesting, maybe groundbreaking piece. And then I'm still representing the writer after an article is finished, because there are ways it gets played in the magazine when we're in production, deciding how much space, whether to cut it or allow it to run full length. There are always adjustments of space to make because we're juggling with a whole bunch of articles, and each one has its own set of demands. I may very well still very strongly advocate for, no, I want that extra column for this article, or that extra page, or hey, can we cut a photograph, make a photo smaller so I can gain 30 extra lines to give to this article because I really don't want to cut anything out of it. And so those are ways in which I'm advocating, editors advocating, and working for the writer. And then after the article goes into production and on press, and then I'm ushering through payment for the writer. So, the writer is still, in a sense, under my wing, and I want to make sure that the writer's contract gets through on time, even though I'm a lousy housekeeper on those things, and that the writer actually gets paid. Every once in a while, there's a glitch. Sometimes I'm the cause of the glitch. Sometimes something in the system happens and a writer doesn't get a check or it goes to a wrong address. I'm still advocating for the writer. And then after an article is published, Psychology Today may be approached because of the article. Some other news outlet wants to do something with that article. And of course, usually I put the writer directly in touch with other people who have interest in it. But of course, I'm still working with the writer because the writer is very much representing Psychology Today. And I want to make sure that the representation is something we can all be happy with. And then after in our contract, once the article is published, we'll promote it in various ways, usually on social media. And then after the magazine goes off sale, so it goes on sale onto the newsstand, it's on the newsstand for a period of time. And then after it comes off sale, off the newsstand, the rights usually revert to the writer. And so that the writer is free then to use the material in a collection, use it in some way in a book that they're developing. And all that I ever ask is, previously or a version of this appeared in Psychology Today. And so I like to make it a really good mentorship experience where we both, the writer and I, both walk away with something positive having transpired. The writer has taught me things, and I've handed a bit of my expertise off to the writer in the questions that I ask and in demonstrating how a piece can be done. And my prerogative is to put a headline on it and display copy, display type, and I hope I do justice to it. Very often writers find that I do. So I hope that we've all walked away with having this very positive experience. They've left with a piece of my knowledge that then lives on in them and they carry off to share with others in the best possible world. In book publishing is a little bit different because authors usually have agents, and an agent is, in the best of cases, a mentor, someone literally legally obligated to represent them on their behalf. Usually writers and agents sign a contract. And as with magazines, writers sign contracts with book publishers. The contract's different, plays out over a longer period of time, and there's a different legal obligation in that monies are usually paid to a writer over a much longer period of time because of the way royalties are calculated in the book publishing world. But in the best of cases, although sadly this happens less frequently today because of the way book publishing has changed, book editors are not always, although the best ones are, advocates and mentors to the writers they're working with. And editors will work with the writer over a much longer time frame. In my experience, I've never done a book in less than a year. Don't have daily contact with the editor, don't even have weekly contact with the editor, may have frequent contact with the editor for a few days episodically over the year. Let's say if there's a major change in my perspective, or I see that the book needs to be longer. Usually, however, those things are negotiated directly through an agent, or especially if the time frame changes. If something comes up in the writer's life and the writer needs to extend the period of time of the contract. I was late on my second book, but it was of no consequence. The editor verbally agreed to extend the contract, and there had been 5 different editors during the life of that contract anyway. In my 3rd book, I actually had to sign a new contract. Not much to renegotiate except a different time frame. And you don't really want to be late on a contract. You don't want to miss anything on a contract, because that gives the publisher the opportunity to reconsider the entire contract and say, hey, well, maybe we don't want to publish this at all now. It gives them an out. But I very successfully negotiated on my 3rd book. So in book publishing, in the best case scenario, there is in-house promotion and publicity, and the editor for the book turns the writer over to the publicity department, and the editor will often be looped in on plans for publicity. So again, it's still an advocate mentoring relationship until the book is published. And even then there's continuing contact. The book may be reprinted. The writer may want to include changes, may even go to a 2nd edition if the book is extremely successful. If it's going back to press for a 2nd edition, the writer there may have been changes, and the writer may want to ask for the opportunity to change the manuscript in some way, and the editor, in the best case, would be an advocate for that. It's always an added expense to change plates. They may negotiate some way in which it's done so that the changes are limited. So editing is another real form of mentorship. It's just applied in a different way, and editors get as much out of it as the writers do. And that's why we do it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on any aspect of the relationship or any aspect about editing and writing.
I was watching this interview with a screenwriter named Corey Mandel, and he was asked what's the best piece of advice that he never took. And his answer was he was told when he first got his big break that he should wait until whatever the next offer is that happens to be something that he loves, instead of taking whatever comes along. And he said that he was told that would determine the trajectory of his career. And so if he waited until he got an offer for something that he would write without being paid for it, he'd do a lot better in his career than if he just took whatever. And I mean, he said he took whatever, and he had a good living, but he didn't do as well as he could have otherwise. And so my question is whether that's good advice for any writer at any level.
There's a lot of luck that goes into that. I mean, these are considerations that everybody faces, and I think not only in writing and in publishing, but in many other fields as well. And do you take only that which you love and which pays phenomenally well, or do you write all the time and write as I can't conceive of writing differently regardless of how much I'm getting paid. So it's all my best shot. And I want my stuff out there. And fortunately, in a position where I don't have to I don't have to make these kinds of decisions so much, but I can tell you that it's very important to keep writing. It's very important because you make your reputation with each good piece you put out. Your reputation rests on what you do. Your reputation is out there, visible to the world. And to me, it's really important to have stuff out there. I'm not going to accept a writing task. If I have a major piece to do, say, for the New York Times, I'm not going to accept a conflicting assignment for another publication, especially if it's on the low pay end of the scale or a less desirable publication. But if I didn't have that Times assignment and it wasn't the National Enquirer or some other publication I couldn't possibly hang my hat with, I would take on another assignment. And so to some degree, it's an artificial question, because it's always important to take on an assignment and to keep doing and to turn out good work, and you never know who's going to see it.
Hara, one thing I think we've talked about in the past, but might be useful for other people watching this, is the type of interaction to have with an editor when doing a book. So with the editors that I hired directly, we had set up the process that they would get back to me with comments after each chapter. The editors that the company I hired to print the book wanted to give me all said, absolutely not. This is totally non-standard. You will only get comments back once the person has completed the book and not a second before, and refused to work any other way. So I don't know if you have thoughts on which way is more common or pros and cons of each that might be helpful for some of the viewers.
Yeah, all of my comments on the relationship between an editor and a writer did not pertain to the freelance arrangement where you're doing a book and you're the writer and you're the contractor hiring the editors. So that's a completely different world. It's a world I've worked in. Every independent contractor is free to make whatever relationship they want with the writer, and every independently working editor can make whatever arrangement that's between them and the writer. I do not know what practices companies have. I've never worked with them. I've never interacted with them. And I'm leery of someone saying to you, oh no, the only interaction is after the entire manuscript is read. That, to me, that raises a lot of questions in my mind about how the manuscript has gone over, who or what is going over the manuscript. Is it being done by artificial intelligence or a real human being? That would be my first question. Because a real editor going over the manuscript is going to have questions and maybe see certain patterns in the way the thing is written and can give the writer feedback that will affect other material that the writer is producing. I mean, that seems to me the most logical pathway. So I'm leery of any company or individual who says, oh no, we only talk to you after we've completely gone through this manuscript. I would want to know why. That would certainly raise questions. Did it raise questions with you?
It did, and I refused to work with them. Excuse me, I refused to work with them that way at first, both because I know as a CTO, I hire software engineers, and I've outsourced as well as had people work for me. I would never say, go build the software,
Yeah.
bring it by at the end, and we'll see if you got it right.
Yeah, I would never Right. I would never, as an editor, I would never say to a writer, call me after you finish the article if you have any, when you have, with your questions. It would be, no, 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 no. I want to hear your questions as you go, because I want you to construct this the right way. I want your concerns addressed.
Right. Same thing when I've done marketing campaigns and other work.
Exactly.
And it struck me as, well, if you get back to me, I totally understood. I even said, look, if maybe I don't touch, you have control of the document. I make no changes until the end. That's fine. But this way, if 2 chapters in, you notice a pattern, you notice I'm doing something wrong,
right.
You can say, let's pause for a week and I'll go fix everything going forward. Or we can talk about if something gets flagged that there's a reason I chose to do it, even though it's non-standard. We'll save time so she doesn't mark it up the rest of the chapter when I say, no, I know it's wrong, or I know you want it that way, but I'm explicitly choosing this way. It just made sense to me. Unfortunately, at the end, so I refused them a few times doing it. And then, as you and I had discussed, right at the end, it was the week that I teach at MIT where I just have no time. And they came back to me and said, we still see problems. And I disagreed. I thought it was at the level the proofreader could have handled, but I didn't have time to argue or look through it or deal with it. So I just threw money at it and accepted yet another editorial pass where I just had to wait in the dark for, in this case, it was 3 weeks because it was the final edit before the proofreader. But still, I just sat there and waited for the input.
And you were unhappy with the final product that they provided?
I would say I don't think so. To give everyone some context, the first editor I hired dropped out after a week, which was a disaster. There were 2 more that kind of backed out before we even had the contract signed. The 4th editor, he did an okay job, but he did a level of, if I was writing a term paper, he certainly caught lots of mistakes. There was competence, did not help me correct things into CMS Chicago Manual style form. There were plenty of things that he missed. And I certainly don't expect, no editor's perfect. We all know you're not going to catch everything. Right. But there were way too many things that, wow, these were really clearly, you missed way too much. When I got my now 5th editor, Carol Reed, Carol did just a truly amazing job, and I had incredible time constraints. The way we did is I sent her the document. Basically each day she would edit a chapter, send it back to me, and kind of give me control for a few hours. I would modify it. I might ask questions. I might correct changes, leave a few things, send it back to her. And in 2 weeks, we did the entire book, 10 chapters, some appendices, introduction, and a conclusion or epilogue. We did it all in 2 weeks. She did a truly phenomenal job. We just literally every day we had our schedule down. By the time it went to this company I hired to do the proofreading and layout, they said, no, it's still not ready for proofreading. That's where I disagreed. And so I said, fine, do another editorial pass. And there were certainly a few things that, again, Carol is not perfect. There were a couple mistakes, like, yeah, that was an obvious mistake that she and I both missed. There were a bunch of other things where I thought, I don't know if I fully agree with this correction. Or there were plenty of places where there were commas that I felt, I don't have your background in grammar and language, and it felt a little to me like some of those commas were a little more optional. So I felt if I hadn't done that last pass, I think the book still would have been okay. So I don't think it was necessarily worth the time and money they put into that last one. It certainly wasn't wrong. He didn't ruin it or do anything bad. I just didn't think it was necessary.
So what we're talking about here is feedback and a schedule of feedback, and whatever the level of editing, whether it's the level of copy editing and proofreading that you're talking about, or at a higher level of, let's say, developmental editing, it's really important that the editor gives feedback, not just at the end, but all the way through at whatever schedule the two parties agree on. I was editing a book. Book is now out, getting some very nice reviews. I was a developmental editor on it, and part of the feedback that I gave to the writer was, hey, this chapter really is in the wrong place in the book. And ultimately, the chapter was broken into two parts, and it really affected the structure of the book in a very positive way. So part of it was in the first part of the book, and part of the chapter was at the very end of the book. And it influenced the way the feedback I gave to the writer influenced the way he envisioned the entire project that he was working on. So it could be very critical information, even if it appears to be kind of routine feedback from the editor to the writer. And it's gotta be much more periodic than, we only dump it on you at the end. That just doesn't work for real professionals. And that really leads me to believe that some AI program is being applied to it rather than real human editors reading it. For your, for what it's worth, that would be my major concern.
AI editing is done out there.
How much?
Yeah, is it a common thing?
I don't know, to be honest with you, but I mean, there's a fair amount of manuscript stuff that is done by artificial intelligence. I mean, I find it very amusing because I do a fair amount of interviewing, and I have the interviews run through a program that transcribes, and that's all done by AI, and it's hilarious. I mean, AI is far from perfect, but some of the imperfections are hysterical. Mishearings and, just change, live in a different region of the country and you completely baffle, a so-called intelligent AI transcription. So, yeah, I mean, there are AI programs that are used. I mean, you could take a manual of style, the Chicago Manual of Style, and digitize that and run it as a program on copy. And, at some point I'm proofreading. There probably, hopefully, will be a day when we can do it. But I don't really know. I haven't really delved that deeply into the world of AI, how much of it is being done to everyday editing. There are just so many qualitative issues that come up in real editing with a real human being that I cannot envision any quality publication.
I have a comment here from Allison Escalante, who I know you work with, and she said, stylistically, AI editing often opts, on the side of the Oxford comma, while many media outlets now deliberately no longer use the Oxford comma.
I'm a champion of the Oxford comma.
Clark Freshman asks which service you use to transcribe interviews, and he also wants to say he loves your scarf.
Thank you. So I use a really cheap program to run my interviews through, and it's called Temi, T-E-M-I, and I might pay $20 an hour transcription. And the reason I do that, there are better transcription services, or I should say more expensive transcription services. Even that company has a higher grade transcription service. I have not noticed any difference. between the lower price one and the higher price one. Except I think in the higher price one, a human goes over it. But frankly, I have not noticed a significant difference in the quality of the transcription. And for me, I can make out what the transcription gets wrong, and I can work with that.
Allison also says to try Otter AI. It's free for the first 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of them out there. I have no allegiance, and I'm not giving any testimonial here. I was just explaining which one I use. There are a bunch of them, and a lot of them have a free trial of some kind. Yeah.
And also Clark says he likes the Oxford comma. I'm just giving you the feedback from those who are on.
Okay. I mean,
100% Oxford comma.
Pardon me?
100% for the Oxford comma. And
yes.
Of course, there were court cases that were decided based on the placement of the lack of an Oxford comma.
I was about to say, please use an Oxford comma in your legal documents.
Right. Eat shoots and leaves. We talk about the Oxford comma. So, yeah, I like it. Makes for clarity. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to use. I don't understand all the big deal over it. Why not? Why not the Oxford comma? 3 cheers for the Oxford comma. What else can we argue about?
Use of M dashes and N dashes.
So the question is...
Oh, I use them all over. I probably use them far more than most people, but I know other people aren't a fan, or using a dash versus parentheses. And I don't know. I actually don't know. Is there a particular reason where you would use a parentheses for a subclause versus some commas for a subclause versus an M dash for a subclause?
I'd have to think about that. So I think it's safe to say that people overuse M dashes. But I will also say that the M dash serves a purpose. And I think it's safe to say, or this is how I think about it. I think that the M dash allows us to do what the computer also allows us to do, which is lateral thinking rather than hierarchical structure. So a dash, and almost always the M dash, serves that purpose. There are times when M dashes are used when what's really called for is a colon, a piece of information that is pursuant to or explains what came before, or is the explanation of what, or an example of what has been led up to. But in general, I think of an M dash as either a punchline or as a piece of information of equal weight and kind of lateral to the point that is being made, if that makes sense to anybody. 30 years ago, you never saw M dashes. I mean, they were extremely rare.
Joel has a quick question.
It's not a question. It's the M dash versus the parentheses. To me, a parenthesis is kind of, by the way, not really relevant, but
True.
Dash is like, hey, let's pay attention. It's almost like an exclamation point.
Right. If you could take it out of the sentence and the sentence still makes sense, yeah, it belongs in parentheses. Sometimes people put information in parentheses that really don't belong in parentheses, that's really kind of necessary for the understanding of what's under discussion. So I'll take it out of parentheses. May not even put it in a dash. May just bang, put it right there. Full blast piece of information. So
Allison likes your idea of a dash as a form of lateral thinking, and I hadn't thought of that either. I like that also.
Good.
Clark, do you have a question?
Do I have a question? Well, it takes us back a little bit farther. You were talking about this interesting scenario where you're an editor and you're reviewing the writer's manuscript, and at a certain point you decide, oh my goodness, this is not going to work out. This is not what I thought it was. And I'm curious, sort of wearing my negotiation teacher scholar hat, like, do you let the writer know at a certain point, oh, by the way, we're in this territory where now I'm wondering whether this is going to work or not? Or is it one of these things, sort of like a bad breakup, where you simply mention at the end?
No, I don't believe in bad breakups. But I will tell you one of the worst things I ever did. So this goes back about 2 years. I was sitting in a coffee shop with a psychiatrist writer. Someone insisted that we meet, thought we'd spark lots of ideas together. We were sitting in a coffee shop talking about ideas, and my beau called, and I couldn't talk to him at the time, and just said, hey, I'll call back. And so I began talking with my new friend, the psychiatrist. I just happened to mention, we were talking about ideas, and I just happened to mention that I had had an experience when I met my beau that just had been on my mind for, it was then 17 years. I had met him shortly after I started dating, after I was widowed, and we had just resumed a relationship. We had dated for 3 years and then not seen each other for 14 years and then resumed. And so I explained how the impression that our first date had made on me. It was just a bizarre experience in which I had to do an interview in the middle of my date. I mean, not exactly what you want to do in the middle of your first date with anyone. So at the time, I was beginning to think about character as a topic, and as slightly distinguished from personality, or as an aspect of personality. And in my head, I was just kind of wrestling with some ideas. And so I just briefly said, I'd had this crazy experience, and it gave me a glimpse into his character that was just, wham, and made a very powerful impression on me. And so that started a conversation between me and the psychiatrist on character revealing moments. And I thought, wow, this is really, as I'm talking about my own experience, which I hadn't really dissected, but had marinated in my brain for 17 years, I realized, and it was like I had all this time, it was like gestating, because it was a very powerful experience to me. I'm talking and I'm making notes, sitting there in the cafe, making notes about all the reasons why this made an impression on me and what it revealed about this other person's character. And because I had explicated all of this with this person who understood, I said to her, this would make really a great article. And she said, yeah, I agree, character revealing moments. And I said, you've got the assignment. And so I said, give me a pitch. And she literally sent me a pitch that was exactly word for word everything that I had said. Now, to me, that was fine, because it made me realize that she understood what was important about the situation. And then we talked about her pitch, and I assigned her the article. And what came in was, there was nothing in the article that was more than what was in the pitch. There was no, and even the examples that she had anecdotes, people's experience were so fake that I couldn't even consider them, and just so unreal sounding. And there was no development of the ideas or exploration of the ideas in any way, other than what had come out of my mouth. So I was pretty shocked. And so I called up the writer and we talked about it and gave her carte blanche to do more after talking about it. And on the next pass, I didn't get anything in that was more usable.
You mean they all felt inauthentic? Is that what you mean?
They all felt inauthentic, and no ideas were explored in any way or developed other than what I had said. So it was just, there was nothing more than what had gone on in the cafe. So, and that to me was a starting point, not an end point. So why would this make an impression on me? What was it? What was the value of knowing certain things immediately about someone before I had any romantic interest? What was the value of knowing certain things? Why was it important to know certain things? What influence would that have on any relationship with anyone, not necessarily a romantic relationship? What was I finding out about this person in this dialogue? None of that was explored, even though I had suggested some people to go to and who would act as sources.
Well, that's really an interesting addition to the story, right? Because
Well, that would be, I would want that in any case.
For her to talk to other people. So it's interesting because in the first version, when I heard this, I thought, oh, you liked the idea, you told her to go forth and write it, and then she came back and there wasn't anything there. But now you're adding in, and this connects with the mentoring part, that you didn't just say, oh, explore in your own head about this. You said, here are steps you could take, talk to these resources who might have ideas.
Oh, yes. So originally I thought she would be that resource. You know, as an expert, as a psychiatrist, I had faith that she would be the resource. She was not. She added no value whatsoever. I had expected exploration of these from the beginning and had told her that. And she understood that, but none of it was there. And what was there was so inauthentic, it was almost embarrassing. So I asked her to take another pass at it. And after explaining to her what I thought was needed, what I got back was literally no improvement whatsoever. Part of the problem was she saw herself as an expert and didn't want to go to other experts. This often happens. And usually I explain that to people. This requires some reportage. Not everybody is up to that. Not everybody wants to do that. The piece, I made the decision that this was just not, I would bat my head against the wall if I tried it a third time and I'd be wasting time. What I did not do was I did not go back to her and say, I'm killing this article, which is what I should have done, and paid her a kill fee, which is 20%. Instead, I thought, okay, I'm going to edit this article. And when I went to edit the article, there was literally nothing except one sentence that I wound up salvaging. What I did was I disguised my own experience, and that became the beginning of the article because it was so incredibly rich and there was so much there to mine, and it so got me into fabulous research that's being done on character, and it just opened up the whole topic in a different way, so that character has been the province of philosophy and theology, and it's sort of character has always been defined by virtues, which in essence are, well, godlike qualities. It's just been this very kind of circular thinking that I never got into that. And it was just, well, character is character. It's good because it's good. And
Right.
I just never could understand that. But there is a whole new way of thinking about character, working from the ground up, that psychologists are doing. And I started looking into work that was being done by people who were part of the Character Project, which was a big project that Templeton Foundation funded, headquartered at Wake Forest University. I think Christian Miller was running the entire project. And I began looking at various presentations that various psychologists had made and found some really fabulous stuff and interviewed these people and got information. Why do we care about character? What is it that we notice about character? And I could then make sense of why things that were said to me on my first date right after this crazy interview that I did, why that made such an impact on me. And every word was etched into my brain for 20 years. And so the article it started with my story, disguised slightly, and went into all of this fabulous work that's being done on character and why it's important and what we notice. And then it came back very gently at the end to my story is sort of without me. So it delivered a lot of information. It just opened up the few things that were said to me and that was the portal into all this other information.
So you rewrote the whole article?
All that was left was one sentence from the original article, and it wasn't really even an informational one. And I called up the writer. This is really funny. I called up the writer and I said, I should have said, I'm killing the article, here's the kill fee. And, we're going to redo it and we're going to do a piece in-house because whatever was of value was stuff I had given you in conversation. Here I was with a finished article. I realized only one line was left. And I sent it to the writer. And I said to her, this is very different from what you sent, and I can understand. I was being coy and subtle, but I thought I was also being ethical. And I said, I can understand if you do not want your name on this. Giving her the opportunity to bow out. P.S. She so badly wanted to be in Psychology Today that she did not bow out.
Oh, so her name went on the article.
Both of our names. The editor-in-chief insisted that my name be on it. And, so both of our names are on it. It's completely my article. But it will live in posterity with both of our bylines on it.
It's really interesting because what I hear from a negotiation lens is that often you want to give someone the opportunity you put to bow out gracefully. But another phrase is,
I handed it to her. I worded it kindly and gently, and she wanted the byline so badly.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're giving her the opportunity to exit the stage. Mm-hmm. And if it were you, and certainly if it were me, and probably everybody on the call and many other people, they would have gotten it that they're looking at an article, there's nothing left of it that was theirs. They would think, oh, that makes sense. Let me bow out, right? I'm just curious, was she playing from a different set of expectations? Like, was she a first-time writer? This was her first time
for Psychology Today, and the person who put her in touch with me originally said, oh, she's dying to write for Psychology Today. And, great, lots of people are, and I would have been happy to work with her, but, this just arose organically in the course of our conversation. And, when we talked about character defining moments, I thought, yeah, she sounds like she really gets it and, could really run with this and do something with it. But she had literally nothing to add. And beyond what we discussed, I just should have killed her piece. And I didn't. And it was partly because, I thought maybe I'll salvage something in the editing. But when when a piece runs through your fingers, you examine the material very carefully, and, usually some of it is good and you save, but literally one sentence, one phrase in one sentence. And I was very surprised. She said, oh, wow, this is really very different, but she didn't get the hint. She just wanted that byline so badly.
Did she submit anything else in the future?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, she knew it did not meet the standard. She never pitched me again. I'm trying to think. I think I've seen her, or maybe we talked about later about other ideas, but nothing ever rose to the standard of doing anything.
Did this affect you in some way with other writers? Like, do you feel more cautious as a result of this too?
No, what it reminded me was I really should not have been so generous.
What do you mean?
Everybody on my staff thought I was insane for the joint byline, and that I should have said to her, look, there's nothing of yours in here. You'll understand. Instead, I paid her full fee for the article.
Oh.
Well, because I didn't early enough in the process say there's not enough here to salvage, I'm going to give you a kill fee. And I couldn't, normally when you give someone a kill fee, they brought an idea to you. Here, I gave her the idea. I mean, that happens. I mean, articles generate in a variety of ways. An editor may start with the idea, or a writer may come and pitch an editor with an idea.
More experienced writer, and she said to you, it sounds like you're killing the original idea. Should we just treat this as a kill fee situation? How would you have responded, do you think?
Run it by me again. Say it, and I'm
So
going to
if she had known, so the idea would be if she had known that, there's this option where sometimes something doesn't work out, you get paid a kill fee. And so she thought, okay, well, that's an option. Of course, this is not really what she wanted, right? So we're having to create a whole new horror. If you're correct that what she really wanted was to have the byline in there, even if none of it was hers, then the kill fee was not at all going to satisfy. If that's really what she wanted, she might have been more willing to say, like, oh my goodness, can I pay you the fee? You don't pay me, and then you will actually let my name be on there, right? That might have been more amenable. But imagine a parallel universe where the person knew what the options were and thought, do you think, maybe they phrased it as, so I've never done writing for Psychology Today before, or let's imagine for a popular publication. And I'm wondering, is this one of these scenarios where the idea is in essence, the way I've done it is being killed? Would that have triggered a different set of thoughts?
I don't know. You mean in her or me? Or
No, in you. So, I mean, the idea is that sometimes people have negotiation scripts of what they think is acceptable or not acceptable.
Okay,
And so,
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Scripts, there's this negative emotion that arises because the people are, it's like, imagine that you're taking a plane ride, right? We'll have to go into either the future or the past for this.
Right.
And you've never taken a plane ride before, and you have certain unreasonable expectations from the point of view of everybody else on the plane, but you've never ridden the plane before. So they're upset and you're upset, but it's not that either of you are bad, anybody's bad. It's just a completely different set of expectations. Happens when people negotiate over things where people think it's gauche to negotiate, right? So you get a bill from someone and you say, oh, I got your bill. People were joking about it on the call last night, right? Susan was joking about it with someone about, oh, I got your bill and I'm discounting it. But people get upset. Discounts are not okay. So the idea here is maybe she just had a different script. And if she had been able to figure out what the script of the negotiation was, there might have been a better outcome. But as I'm saying this, I come to the conclusion that maybe if she had had the full script, she would have instead realized, oh, wait a second, this is not a kill fee situation, because it's not that I brought something to the table and therefore fairly I should be compensated for what I brought.
Yeah.
The idea was that I got an idea from Hara, and then I was going to do two things. I was going to research it, and then I was going to write out this article that would draw on the research and maybe some of my reflection. But lo and behold, I didn't actually do that. Now that I look at it, I see that the idea came from Hara. I didn't contribute a new idea. I didn't do the research, and I didn't necessarily do it in some insightful, repackaged way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that situation. Right. I should bow out. It didn't work out that way.
So
Yeah.
Allison says, so full circle to editors need to give feedback early.
Yeah, I gave feedback very early. And, as soon as I got the article, I was optimistic that I would be able to save some of what she wrote. When I went to edit it, there was nothing salvageable except for this one line toward the end of the article. I felt I was in an ethical bind in that, oh my gosh, I didn't tell her off the top of, before I edited this. I went into the editing process on the assumption that this would be her byline, my idea. That happens all the time. That's no big deal. My idea, her byline, she would have written the story. I didn't realize how little would be left. And I've been in this situation many times before. And I go to the writer and I show them the edited copy and I prepare them for it and say, look, I realize this is vastly different from what you submitted. And without any prompting, the writer will say, yeah, you deserve the credit for this, or, Psychology Today does. I can't, in good conscience, put my name on this article. How do we handle that? That's happened plenty of times to every editor and every writer, I'm sure. And when I went back to the writer and said that, it was like, I gave her that opening without literally telling her to do it. I prompted her. I said, I could understand if you chose not to have your name on this. And damn, she wanted that byline so badly that she didn't accept the offer.
It's the price of indirection, right?
Yeah, the price of indirection. You're right. And
Yeah.
there may very well have been editors who said a little more bluntly, look, this is not your story. How do we want to handle this? I could have said, look, I need to give you a kill fee on this. Come to me with a proposal for a different article. Although at this point, I really didn't want to work with her. There was no bad blood, mind you. I just made the judgment based on the fact that she considered herself an expert on matters relating to psychology and didn't want to do any research and go to other primary sources. And I didn't get the story that was warranted by the information, that was required. And,
this is like a normal relationship, you're talking about a relationship here, and you get embedded just like a mentor would, in a way that is you're taking it to the as far as you possibly can. I think that it shows the human side of you and why it's so much better than AI, because you're at least you're really taking it to the full length, and are looking out for the best interest of whoever you're working with, which is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah, I'm looking out for two things. I'm looking out for the best interests of the person I've commissioned to do the piece, and I want them to be seen in the best light, but I also want the best information on the topic. And by the way, it is the one topic that has been rattling in my brain for 20 years, and that I would, if I do my next book, that's the topic. I loved the article as it came out. I love the information that I dealt with. I love the information that I sort of put out there for people to think about. I love the new information on character and why character is important and what purpose it serves. And it's really, really important. And I want people to know it. And I think that post-Trump, we're going to be very interested in character, because there's failings or major failings of character, and I think the world is going to be interested in it. And I kick myself because I don't have 5 minutes of time to spend developing the proposal on character.
Well, there's that proposal out to anyone listening, to help you out with that. But we have about 4 minutes left, and so I'm hoping that if anybody has some questions, that they might take this. It's like a last call at the bar. Last call for questions.
I don't have a question, but I'll just make a comment. I am definitely going to call you about the issue of character. I've been talking about this for a very long time, so we will talk.
Okay, good.
Joel has something to say.
Hara, in addition to what Debbie said about you being kind, and Clark talked about negotiation, I'm going to be a little harsher on this person. She seems dishonest to me. It was plagiarism. She took your idea.
No, it wasn't plagiarism. I agreed for her to take my idea.
But she didn't do it.
She didn't do anything more than repeat back to me what I had said to her. I expected, that was to me only the starting place of the article, and I expected all of that to be developed. So she was dishonest. I don't know that she was dishonest. More that that is not the word I would use. I think that
she sounds concrete without analyzing her, since I'm not seeing her, you know, but there's like, she does definitely, like when you gave her that twice to go and do, she just was very concrete, repeated your words back. You concretely said to her, you know, you would understand if she didn't, and she might have thought, well, of course I want to be on this article. So no, you know, it almost sounds like she's just someone who her goal was to have her name in Psychology Today.
Oh yeah, that was clear. She told me that from the very beginning. Yeah.
And that's the lens. So she was going to do anything. So if you gave her that opening of if you gave her the opening of being on the article, then why wouldn't she take it if that's all she could see?
I know. Yeah.
Well, then you both reached your goal. She got on, and you got the great idea that you gave to yourself.
You're nicer people than I am. I would have said, I'd like to believe I would have said, you've done nothing. You can leave now.
Well, you know, Joel, what it did was, in kinder words, that's what I would say next time. I would take that extra step. And be a little bit more explicit the next time. I hope there isn't a next time, because I don't want to be in that position.
Of course not.
But it's very rare that I kill an article. It's rare.
She put you in that position. You did
not.
She did.
She did. I have to say.
Well, anyway. I have to say that this is, you know, I think that we all think of an editor as someone that's out there that is, you know, that has a certain job that is doing something, but you're
Yeah.
out there
Drop
with emotions,
on words.
feelings, and you come to it as a mentor. And I think that that's something that we really can take away from this, is that you are really there in a helpful way. And I want to thank everybody for coming on today, because you know, it was great dialogue, but also Hara, I really learned a lot from you today, and I want to thank you.
Well, thank you. It's always fun. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks, Mentor Project, and thank you, everybody.